I'm standing in my intro, which can only mean one thing. My room is a complete disaster because I'm prepping for yet another DIY project. So to continue our theme of I am hyperfixated on looking just like a storybook character, this week we are making a flower fairy hat. This isn't a new or novel idea. In fact, I'm willing to bet that if you search on YouTube flower fairy hat, you're going to see dozens of videos of people making the very same thing. And if that's how you found my video, welcome. Subscribe. That being said, I cannot claim to be unique or an innovator of this project. I just want a freaking flower fairy hat, and content creators gonna content create. I did my usual gathering of inspiration pictures from Pinterest, my ride or die. But this time I'm going to be super careful as to not share my specific inspiration photos in this video or any of my videos in the future, unless of course I credit the original source of the inspiration photos, because people tend to upload product photos to Pinterest without linking them back to the original shop, because I don't want to be accused of stealing someone else's idea. Even though, again, this is not unique, everybody's done it. But I will link my Pinterest board down below in the description, so if you are curious to see what inspiration photos I did accumulate over the months to spark some ideas in my noggin. One of the pins is actually a tutorial that was posted by the user Nepotune on TikTok. I will be linking her video as well on TikTok in the description. I guess I should stress that this is not a tutorial. As always, I never know what the hell I'm doing. So come for the vibes and the memes, man. It's to be noted that Nepotune was inspired by a fairy from the Spiderwick Chronicles, which has immaculate vibes. My flower fairy hat, on the other hand, will differ quite a bit from her hat. I was actually inspired to create a flower fairy character back in 2021, I believe, which was no doubt inspired by the countless flower fairy hats that there are circulating the interwebs. But I assume that it is safe to share my own work, so this is the fairy that I drew based on myself back in 2021. It was kind of like a turn myself into a fairy challenge. I am considering styling this crappy ginger wig to look a little bit more like my original illustration. My hair was a bit shorter in 2021 and 2020. I had like a blunt lob wavy hair situation, and I also want to add some pink tones to this to look a little bit more like the picture. I kind of drew her to have my dream hair color, which was like ombre with orange and pink. One of my dream hairs, one of them. So I might style this wig and color it a bit for that as well, but don't do that to your wigs. Preamble aside, let me show you guys my materials that I've assembled. First, we need the felt. I grabbed 3 different colors, mostly because I bought out all of this color, so I needed something as a backup in case I didn't have enough. So I grabbed this lilac purple, and then for the leafy bits, I got this really pretty, almost like an olive color, this is like my favorite green, so I was pretty stoked for this. Michael's was the most cost-effective place that I could find locally that carried felt. It was a lot more expensive to order online on Amazon, so I chose to go to Michael's to get it. They do carry ones that are less than $1 each. However, I opted to get the ones that are a little over $1 each just because they're a little bit thicker. I didn't want my petals to feel like crepe paper, so I did get, I think they were like $1.20 something. I'll have to put it up on the screen. Editing Scotty, please help. And so I figured these would be the perfect size to cut out my pieces. Anything else that I use, I will just note in my sassy little voiceover that I always do. So come along with me, let's make this frickin' flower fairy hat. That was almost an alliteration. But first, your girl has to get paid. She needs her paycheck. So I'm gonna give it away to sponsor Scotty. Okay, so I'm pretty sure by now you guys probably know how much I love Sondaflor. So when they offered to sponsor yet another video, I was like, yes, of course. It also helps that whenever they do sponsor me, they send me another package with lovely samples of their product, which I could probably never afford on my own, so thank you very much, Sondaflor. You are feeding my obsession with your twirly dresses. This time around, they sent me a top, which I actually don't have a Sondaflor top, so this is a first for me. And then they sent me one of their pinafores, which I already have 2 of them in other colors and prints, and I am obsessed. Sonaflor is a sustainable slow fashion brand that has timeless clothing staples ethically made with organic linen, which is incredibly breathable and perfect for the summer heat. They're pretty well known for their dresses, which are super versatile, and they offer many different styles, including their pinafore, which I mentioned I am obsessed with, which can be worn with a top or it can be worn on its own as a sundress, which is one of my favorite ways to wear it. And as always, all of their dresses have pockets. They have some amazing new colors and prints that they released just in time for summer. And speaking of summer, they're actually going to be having a summer sale soon, where you can save up to 40% off. Click the link in the description or in the pinned comment if you'd like to get one for yourself. Thank you again, Sonaflor, for sponsoring today's video and being a channel favorite. Now back to our regular scheduled programming. All right, time to get this project started. So the very first step is to figure out what shape we want our petals to be. I don't have any newspaper, so I ended up just using a sketch pad, which admittedly is not the best paper to use because it is a bit more rigid, but I made it work. My mannequin head is a little small, so I put a couple hats on it because I have a big old noggin to house this glorious brain of mine. JK, it's average at best. And then when I went to tape the pattern pieces onto the hat, I actually ended up crumpling up the pieces of paper to make them a bit more flexible, and this worked pretty well. So it was a good workaround not having any newspaper. And then I just figured out the layout and made sure I had enough pieces. Just kind of zhuzhed them around on the hat, taping it down as I went. And it's to note that in the final, this is not the actual pattern that I go for when putting the petals down, but it worked for this stage, so I just went with it. And also, since paper and felt have a different consistency, it is going to lay a little bit different. The paper likes to stick up more, but the felt is going to be a little bit more floppy. So we're gonna address that later when we do the painting and all that on how to get the felt to be the right consistency. Okay, so paper mock-up is done. This is about how it's going to look. So now I just need to detach all of the pieces and cut them out in felt. Now, when it comes to marking felt, I found that a marker was a lot easier than a pen or a pencil. So pro tip there. So yeah, I just drew on the shape that I needed on each piece of felt and repeated that process throughout. And then once the pieces were all cut out, came the time to pin it onto my little hat form that I made. Because I'm gonna end up sewing the petals together, I covered my hat with painter's tape so I wouldn't accidentally catch any threads with my needle. And I also made a top and a bottom, just some round pieces to anchor the petals to, since there is a little bit of a gap at the top. This will give the hat a lot more structure and stability. And as you can see here, instead of overlapping each of the petals like I did with the pattern, I'm actually putting them in a bit of a checker pattern. I know it's going to look a bit like a court jester at the beginning, but don't worry, it's not going to look like that in the end. And then when I went to actually go and sew this together, I decided to use hot glue to kind of pin the different pieces down instead of just relying solely on the pins. This is because sometimes the pins tended to slide around, and I didn't really like that. Now, I'm not using hot glue exclusively because we all know how unreliable hot glue is, especially when it's exposed to body heat. So I'm just using dabs of hot glue to secure the pieces together, kind of like using pins. And I made sure to keep away from the edges because if you've ever tried to sew through hot glue, it's not, no, don't do that. So I kept it away from the edges where I would be sewing. And then came the time to just hand stitch everything together. This took a long time, however, it was kind of a therapeutic process. I just threw on a podcast and just stitched my little heart out. Obviously, I could only match the thread to one of the colors, so I chose to match it to the reddish, pinkish raspberry color. And since I'm going to be painting over everything and blending the colors together, I didn't really worry about the thread showing up on the lavender. And I also didn't really worry about my stitching being too messy because again, we're going to be painting over it. I just needed to make sure it was secure. Okay, so here is where we are at so far. Right now, I look a bit like a court jester because of the mismatching petals, but I'm gonna be going over this with some fabric paint to make it kind of blend more and also to give it more depth. You guys know how much I love my painting and giving things depth. So I'm gonna do all of that before I add the leaves. And then I don't know if during that process, I'll be able to apply the Mod Podge to like stiffen this a little bit, but I need to be able to make this curl upward and have it keep its shape. Otherwise, it's floppy and it doesn't look like a flower. It looks like a goofy hat. This actually went really well. I was afraid I was gonna stitch the hat to the hat that I was using to beef out the hat form, but I applied painter's tape, which kept me from catching the threads of this hat. And it is the perfect size. It's actually a little bit loose, but I'm thinking when I wear this, I'm either A, gonna be wearing a wig, or B, I'll probably be wearing my hair extensions, so my hair will be thicker. Plus my hair's kind of dirty right now and I need to dye it, so she's a little flat. So here you can see me just painting over the petals to make sure that they blend and adding some shadows and highlights in different tones. I started out using my sponge brushes, however, I will later switch back and forth from that to a regular paintbrush, and then finally you're gonna see me switch to just using my fingers because both the paintbrush and the sponge brush kept catching on the little fibers of the felt, which was kind of annoying and it kept balling up. So I just started finger painting at some point. I just transformed into a 5-year-old and it was actually quite satisfying. The only downside was that the pink paint kind of stained my hands even after I washed it off, and it took me a couple days to get all the paint out of my fingernails. Don't forget to get the bottom. And that spray bottle was there because sometimes wetting the fabric actually makes the paint spread easier. Once I had everything painted, I went in and pinned the petals, curling it upward because I figured that as the petals dried that the fabric would start to stiffen, so I wanted to make sure I kind of utilize that to my advantage. You know, it's kind of like putting in roller sets in your hair. Although I missed a petal when I was painting the lines. Forgive me, but I sewed a lot of the stem off camera because it's a little bit hard to film and sew at the same time, but you kind of get the gist. I just lined them up and I just did a little stitcheroony on the outside. I didn't really care that it had an exposed hem because it kind of adds a little rusticness to it, and I kind of like that. And then once that was done, I just went in and added some shading and some lines onto the leaves and the stem just to give it a little bit more depth and so it would match the petals. Although I didn't do nearly as much as I did on the petals, I just did enough to where it looks nice. And then here I'm just adding a very thin coat of Mod Podge to the tips of the petals just to make sure they stay stiff. And so I'll be able to mold them into the shape that I want. So as you can see here, they have dried all curled up. and I can kind of maneuver this, kind of pull them out or curl them up more. They're still pretty flexible, but they're stiff enough to where they can actually hold themselves up. And then the stem was hollow. However, off screen, I did add a piece of rolled up felt with a piece of wire on the inside just to give it like the little curl, and that kind of sticks out of the top of the stem. And then I am just adding a piece of felt to the bottom just to stabilize it. And then it was time to add the stem and the leaves to the top of the hat to complete the look. I just used hot glue to secure it. I wasn't really worried about this part falling off. However, if I have any issues, I'll just throw some stitches on there, but it seems to be holding up pretty well. Are you kidding me? This has to be my favorite thing I've ever made. Next to the wings. Honestly, I don't know which one I love more, this or the wings. I did say that it's a little bit big on me. I was gonna add like some elastic on the inside so it hugs my head a little bit better, or maybe some lining, but actually now that my hair's kind of fluffy because I just dyed it, it actually fits kind of perfect. I think too with the wig that I am styling for it, it's gonna look fantastic. The only thing is I'm afraid it might fly off if the wind catches it, so I still might add the elastic to it. I don't know yet, but I'm not gonna do that for this video. You guys got the bulk of this make. Pretty much all of it besides a couple little tweaks I'm gonna make before I go to the Ren Faire. Also, I feel like the duckies. This is what it looks like on the inside. See, this is why I kind of want to put a lining in it so it looks a little bit more profesh. But like, honestly, this looks as good, if not a little bit better, if I'm tooting my own horn here, than the ones that I was referencing on Pinterest. I could just be biased because I made it and I'm super proud of it, and I made this with my own two hands. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching and enjoying this little build. Also, thank you to Sondaflor for sponsoring today's video. And yeah, I decided that the wig that I styled specifically for this look is actually going to be part of a bonus video that I'm going to be posting for channel members. And maybe in the future, once I hit 20K, I will also create a Patreon to also put my bonus videos in case you prefer that over signing up for channel memberships on YouTube. Let me know what you guys think of that. I've been thinking about Patreon lately, but I don't know how many people would actually subscribe. I'm no Rachel Maxey. I'm not gonna get like 5,000 people or whatever it was in the first day. Probably like 2 people. Gotta start small, right? Thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure you hit that like button to help boost this out into the algorithm. Leave a comment down below letting me know where you would wear such a fine hat. And if you don't really want to comment that, but you don't know what else to comment, just leave some flower emojis in the comments for the algorithm. Subscribe, bye.